Adding form fields. We're now going to add form fields to our document. And in the PDF form that we're creating, we have a couple of key form field types that we're going to be using, which include text fields, checkboxes, as well as radio buttons. Now what we're going to do now is jump over to Acrobat, and we're going to start adding form fields to this document. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this document to make it a little bit easier for us to see here. And I'm going to come over here to the Prepare a Form tool. So I'm going to click that button. And again, my Auto Detect Form Fields is currently off. And I'm going to create the form. And now I'm in form editing mode. And now I can start adding my form fields. Now to get started here, we really have a bunch of text fields. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here and grab my text field. And then you can see that the default size of this text field doesn't really match up with the size that's been allotted. So instead of just clicking, I'm going to click and drag to draw a form field within that area. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch to my selection tool, and I'm going to double click on this form field. Now, as you're creating your form fields, technically the name of the form field doesn't really mean a whole lot from an accessibility standpoint. However, it's really helpful for keeping yourself organized as you're working with your form fields, because what you're going to see over here is a list of fields that's going to say text 1 through 50, or however many form fields you have. And how do you know which one goes to which form field? So for that reason, I'm a huge advocate of properly naming my form fields. It's just a nice thing to do to help you stay organized. So obviously I'm going to call this one employee name. Now, one of the requirements for accessibility is that every form field needs to have a tooltip. And the tooltip is what actually gets voiced when a user is reading the form using assistive technology. So in my tooltip here, I'm simply going to type enter the employee's name. Okay. Now what I'm also going to do right now is I'm going to go to the Appearance tab. And this allows me to control what the text within the form field looks like. Now, in this particular situation, the caption for the form field, right? So this information here is in a Roman font. And the default value for this form field is a sans serif font. So if that's what you want, that's totally fine. But if you wanted the text to look similar to the caption, you may want to change your font to something else. I'm going to change mine here to Times New Roman, which is another Roman font. Now the size I'm not sure about. And it's for this reason that I always like to test my form before I continue on with the rest of my form fields. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the Prepare a Form tool. And now I can actually click in here and enter the text that I want to appear. So I'm going to enter my name here. And as I look at the size of the text that I entered relative to the caption, I think that looks pretty good. I think the size is good. I think the position is good. And I think I'm going to run with that because honestly, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to my Prepare Form tool. Now, something you want to remember about when you test a form field is that whatever you type in there, it remembers. So to clear that out, you can come over here to the Fields panel, and if you click on the 3 dots, we can choose Clear Form. And that'll wipe out any text that we've put in there. Now, to continue on here, we could keep drawing form fields. What I don't like about that is that you end up with a form that has form fields of all different sizes. It's not really a great experience, and visually it doesn't look good. So for that reason, once I have a form field that I like once I have a form field that looks good, I simply make copies of that form field. That way they're all the same size and they all look the same. So if I switch to my selection tool up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this form field. And if I hold down the control key on my keyboard and I drag, and as I'm dragging, if I add the shift key, when I let go, it's going to make a copy of that form field. And now I can simply resize the form field to the area that I want it to occupy. And now I can double click on this and give this a new name. So here I will type employee ID, and I'll say enter the employee ID here, or just enter the employee ID is enough, I guess. And that's how I would continue moving on. So here, right, we have a date of request. So again, I'm going to hold down control, drag, and I'm going to move this over to here, and then I can resize it. And then I can double click, give it a new name. In this case, I can go to my Format tab, and in the Format category, I can choose Date from the drop-down, and then I could choose what date format I want them to use. So I'll go ahead and close out of this. Now, I have a whole bunch of text fields that I still need to do. So I'm going to zip through them, and I'm going to add the rest of these text fields. Now that you know how to create these, you could do it on your own, but I don't want you to have to watch me do all of these. So I'm going to quickly zip through and add the rest of these text fields in this document. Okay, so now we have all the text fields created. Now we can start going into some of the other form field types. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and we can see here under the Authorizing Supervisor Manager that there is an employee status. And you can see that there's two choices. And it seems to me that there should be only one possible choice of the two. They're either a permanent employee or a non-permanent temporary employee. So that is the purpose of a radio button. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my radio button. And it looks like the default radio button is going to be a little bit big here. So I'm going to draw a radio button at a more appropriate size. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to switch to my selection tool, and I'm going to double click on that. And so I'm going to give this a name of employee status. And the tooltip will be choose your employee status, right? Now, the way that radio buttons work, if you go to the Options tab, we can define a radio button choice. And so the choice for this one should be permanent. And then I'm going to make a copy of that radio button over here. And I'm going to change the choice to say non-permanent temporary. And notice that the name of the button remains the same. So both of the radio buttons have employee status as the name, but what makes them unique is the option choice defined for the radio button. So I'm going to scroll down here. Here we have another example of that where we have recommend approval or do not recommend approval. Seems to me there should be only one possible choice of the two. So that's going to be another case for a radio button. Now again, what I can do, because I made these the size that I want, I'm just going to make a copy of this radio button, but then I'm going to double click on it and change the name to approval. And then I'll type in here, choose approval status. And then the option here will be recommend approval. And then we'll make a copy of that radio button over here. And we'll change the choice to say, do not recommend approval. Okay. So that takes care of those. Let's see what else we have. So down here, we have another situation, right? Approved or not approved. So again, I'm going to make a copy of this radio button. We're going to give this another name. So I'll call this HR resources approval, right? So we got to give each radio button has to have a unique name. And that's why I'm doing this. So my option is approved. And then we'll make a copy of that over here. And we'll simply change the option to not approved. Okay. And I think that covers that. Now, the only thing remaining in this particular form is we have a couple of signature fields. Okay. Now, over here, you can see we have a signature for the employee, right? So I'm going to grab my digital signature field, and we'll go ahead and drop in a signature field right here. And I'm going to now double click on this, and I'm going to call this one employee signature. And the tooltip will be employee signs here. Now we're going to come up here to the signed tab. And the way this form, or the way this digital signature field is currently working, is that when somebody signs this field, nothing really happens. But what you really want to happen is that once they sign the document, at least from an employee standpoint, all of their form fields should lock so that nobody can go back and make edits to them. So what we could do here is we can choose mark as read only, and then I'm going to choose just these fields. And then I'm going to click the pick button. And now I can go through here and choose which fields I want to get locked. And then I'll click OK. And so now I've defined the fields that should be locked when the employee signs this document. Now, we need to create a digital signature for the other users as well. Now, I'm going to try to make a copy of this, but you'll see that digital signature fields cannot be copied because each one of them is very unique. So to add the other signatures in this form, I'm going to have to redraw the signatures for each person. So I'll just go ahead and click down here. And this will be the authorizing supervisor signature. And I'll go to signed. And we'll pick the fields that we want this to lock. All right, so you would want to repeat that for the human resources director as well as the human resource consultant. And I'm going to do those two really quickly to finish off this form. And there we go. So we've now added all of the appropriate form fields to this document. And now we're ready to proceed with continuing to make this document accessible.